time taking on vision. And it's an awesome vision meeting we have today. We're really happy to have Chief Schick with us to give us a report on our police department from 2022. But before we move forward with that, we're going to have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Dennehy.
Here.
Schmischer.
Here.
Brennan Smith. Stein. Tracy.
Here.
Worthington.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hemrick.
Here.
And Mayor Smith.
Here. Before I turn the time over to you, Chief, it seems like we've been giving a lot of accolades to our department in the last week, and so a lot of really important cases have been cracked and arrests made, and another one came to light today. Just really, that was an important one with the Walgreens and the child.
Was indeed, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, exploitation.
Yeah, this annual report for 2022 is a reflection of a lot of dedication and sacrifice by our police officers and detectives, and our code enforcement, our community service officers, and I couldn't be prouder. This document is somewhat it is a reflection, but it's an opportunity for them to just understand how significant what they do is. So, you know, I'm very proud to produce this and produce it for council, go over it today. We're going to look to publish it so that folks can see it at home. I think that's important that they understand just exactly what's going on in their police department. And this is a good starting point for sure. So I'll take you to page 5 where we have our vision statement, our mission statement, and our values of the department. We focus a lot on delivering a high level of service. We talk about due diligence and things like that on every case, call, and contact. But the driving principles behind our men and women at the police department are these values here that you see on page 5: courage, professionalism, respect, integrity, diligence, and excellence. We test these values every day, and it certainly becomes part of our overarching mantra, which is service excellence. We've narrowed it down to one focal point, and we're staying on track for that. Talking about going on to page 6, our overview, the entire policing model that we adopt is based on the 6 pillars of the President's Task Force Report, 21st Century Policing Principles. And Principle 1 is building trust and legitimacy in the community. Pillar 2 is policy and oversight. Pillar 3 is technology and social media. Pillar 4 is community policing and crime reduction. Pillar 5 is training and education. And we wrap up with officer safety and wellness. Each one of these pillars is represented in a variety of capacities across our department. And we work every day to build capacity in these particular pillars. It's a kind of a guiding principle to us so that we know that we're delivering that high level of service. And on the back end, we're getting a high level return for our officers in terms of their training, in terms of their mental wellness and things of that nature. So going on to page 7, we had a number of things that we employed last year, primarily in Pillar 3 of technology and social media. And some of those things include our automated traffic sign to provide data and traffic volume, speed, and other information to improve traffic enforcement. We ordered, and those have become really useful and critical to us understanding there's often a difference between perception and reality. So we get calls from citizens, and we're able to deploy these instruments and put them down there and conduct real time and accurate traffic studies to give us an idea how significant, well, A, do we have a problem, and B, how significant it is. And then it gives us the ability to target high volume times and those peak speed times so that we can focus our enforcement efforts, which becomes important when you consider the number of people on a shift and the fact that we're responding to 28,000 calls a year. So we have to try and make the most of our time. So that's certainly been useful. We've adopted 2 traffic signs, and we use those pretty regularly. In fact, we usually have a waiting list of areas that are hoping to get that first, what we call the initial phase of traffic enforcement, and that's going out, studying the problem, and determining exactly how to best to respond to it. We also have received generously through council and the relief fund, COVID-19 relief funds, new pack set radios, and we are well beyond our useful life of service life for our current radios, so we're very much looking forward to getting those issued out. We're currently waiting on back order for batteries for about half of them. The department also joined the ABLE project. The ABLE project is a significant initiative, national initiative that we adopted, and we are one of a handful in the state of Colorado. We're currently the only one in Fremont County. The sheriff's office is currently pursuing this, and Post will make this a mandate statewide in 2023, what I'm told. ABLE originated out of Georgetown School of Law, and it gives us training and resources to teach law enforcement how to intervene in use of force incidents, and talks about mental health issues and how to deal with those before they become misconduct issues. So we talk about, we try to put a priority on intervention, but we try to teach officers what that looks like and how that is in their best interest, and it should be a tool in their tool belt, just like every other tool that they have on their belt, that insulates themselves, their peers, and the agency, and ultimately the city from unnecessary events that could ultimately lead to significant civil litigation. Beyond ABLE, we also adopted the Project Lifesaver. We have everything in place. We've done full department training, and we're getting ready to deploy those here in probably the next 4 to 6 weeks. We have a list of clients in the community that we think this will be suitable for. Project Lifesaver is an instrument that allows us to, in real time, track individuals who are prone to wandering and getting lost in our community. So we put a bracelet on them. That bracelet emits a radio signal, and we have tracking devices that help us triangulate their location and get to them pretty quickly. Typically, in a lost person case that they are wearing the Project Lifesaver bracelet, we're usually talking about 30 to 45 minutes. That saves a considerable amount of time, resources, and of course, the victim or client may be exposed to some harsh weather, so that's pretty important to us. Moving along, we also this year, going to page 8 now, I'm sorry, Pillars 1 and 4, Trust and Legitimacy, Community Policing, and Crime Reduction. I'm certain that it's not escaped council that that's become a focal point for us. Being able to engage the community and build that relationship of trust and understanding is a significant fiber of our policing abilities. So we have increased our community engagement activities throughout the year. Officers regularly staffing events like Blossom, Whitewater, Canyon City Jubilee, and other 150th anniversary related events back in 2022. That community, providing community presence at major holidays and community festivals, totaling over 20 separate events throughout the year, staffed with officers assigned to meet community members. We also participated in National Night Out program and organized a record-breaking Shop with a Cop event where we provided Christmas gifts for about 120 underprivileged children. Very, very proud of our department, particularly BJ Serta and Jamie Alvarez, who spearheaded a lot of these initiatives like our golf tournament, our 50-50, and other events, raising over $30,000 last year. So we're really proud of that. And again, it's about building those relationships with our community and showing them a different side to law enforcement. As we move on to page 9, tribute to our fallen comrade, Commander Steve Husky, who we buried in May of 2022. And we'll move on to page 10, our law enforcement division. This is the face of our agency. They are our first responders. They are the face of the agency, and as I try to explain, currently in one-on-ones with each of our personnel, and we just reflect and try to find our true north and kind of just recalibrate what we're doing, where we're going, that kind of thing. So, I tell them, every single contact is essential. Every case is essential. Every call is essential. We talk a lot about things like due diligence and what that looks like in terms of wraparound services to provide that high level of service, that service excellence that we seek to provide. And the patrol division, in particularly within law enforcement division, they are absolutely essential in that capacity. So the law enforcement division supports or embraces pillars 1, 2, 4, and 6. That's all trust and transparency, policy and oversight, community policing and crime reduction, and of course, officer safety and wellness. They are our most visible division within the department, and they work every day engaging the community and addressing concerns, building those layers of trust and transparency. This division supports policy and oversight through direct supervision of officers and interactions. The division supports community policing and crime reduction with proactive patrols and criminal investigations. And finally, we support officer safety and wellness through established peer support, our peer support program, regular shift training on safe officer tactics, and just building a culture of looking out for one another, supporting one another. We also had a significant event in December 2022 where the Law Enforcement Division Commander Tim Bell successfully graduated from the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Rigorous 10-week program of instruction, including topics surrounding leadership, media relations, personnel management, and we couldn't be happier for him. He brought back a world of insight and perspective that he's spreading throughout our leadership, our first level leadership at the agency. That is the first NA graduate we've had since 2015, 16, I believe it was. So if you look further down, we talk about in 2022 the number of calls. You'll see we had 28,114 calls for service, resulting in 4,000, nearly 4,100 crime reports or police reports. In 2021, we responded to 26,369 calls for service. So we have a slight uptick of about 1,745 calls, or 6.62% increase in call volume. 95% of those calls were handled by officers within the law enforcement division. Average response time for these calls was about 8 minutes and 10 seconds. Last year's average response time was a few minutes faster, but again, we saw that increase. The average response time for a physical disturbance was 5 minutes and 14 seconds, and the average response time for physical disturbance call was 3 minutes and 32 seconds. And, you know, just a snapshot of looking at those calls and those response times, it becomes apparent that we're doing a fairly good job of triaging our calls for service and identifying those priority calls and getting there a little faster. Again, trying to deliver that service excellence. You know, when comparing that
Chief.
ourselves to
Hey,
other.
Chief, just a
Chief,
sec, we have a couple
the-
questions.
I do have a question for you on response times. Is there another metric that might make that perhaps illuminate what's going on there a little bit better? I mean, because if you have an officer that's on that side of the city and the call is on the other side of the city, maybe a you know, response miles statistic or something like that. In other words, not just time, but miles traveled to respond. If that, I don't know, maybe that's in our next version of CAD that we can pull those kind of numbers out. But there's more than just the absolute response time, although that is, when you're in a life critical situation, we all realize that is of utmost importance, and I'm not downplaying that at all. But there's
Yes,
other,
sir.
there's
There's
other
a number
things.
of variables out there. that,
Yeah, so-
If we could capture that data, would tell another side of the story. not
And perhaps the
necessarily
next
different.
CAD can do that better than what we've got now. I'm not sure that our CAD automatically records something like that. you
No,
know?
I don't think so. But it's certainly worth looking into, and we're getting ready to deploy the new Axon 5 dash cams in all the units. I don't know that it has that capacity, but, you know, we may be able to look at AVLs or something in the future. The neat thing with the dash cams that we're getting ready to deploy, we are talking with another service that is getting ready to partner with Axon that's called Flock Camera Systems, a remarkable crime reduction tool that turns all of our cameras into license plate readers so that we can very quickly and efficiently identify suspect vehicles by plate, and then it goes one step beyond. It allows you to identify makes and models, colors. It can get as finite as a vehicle with particular bumper stickers on the car. So we're excited about that opportunity. But there are a lot of variables out there, and we can certainly look at that tell another side of the story. You're correct.
A more complete story, perhaps.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Moving along, just kind of in a compare and contrast, we look at Colorado Springs Police Department at their priority call response time was averaging 11 minutes and 51 seconds, and lower priority calls taking considerably longer. Overall case clearance for Canyon City in 2022 was 41%. That's a remarkable number when you compare it to the average number or the national number, which is 32.21%. So I credit this to the hard work of each one of those officers who are out there diligently, managing their caseload. So we, right after I got here in 21, we started looking at cases and managing them more effectively and closing them out appropriately. That was a huge undertaking because we rolled back a year to make sure that, you know, we weren't leaving any citizens or complaints behind that needed needed further attention. So that number is
Sorry,
yes, ma'am.
Council, just go ahead and speak up as you want.
Okay.
please. Yeah.
And you may have been about to answer this question. Could you remind us what case clearance means?
Case clearance is how the case is closed. So it can be closed by arrest. Obviously, you make an arrest and a case is closed by arrest. It can be closed by exception, meaning you have the facts and circumstances to substantiate a criminal charge, but you have either a prosecutor or a victim who declines prosecution. And then it could be unfounded, where the crime's been reported, but you can't find any evidence to corroborate that. And then there's inactive. You got active and inactive. So if the case goes active, then it gets assigned back to the officer, unless it goes to the detective bureau and we assign it to a detective. The case cannot be closed inactive until a supervisor reviews and makes sure every single possible lead has been closed out, exhausted, and we don't have the evidence to go anywhere else. And our final posture is to circle back with the victims and let them know, what we've done.
Thank you.
Chief, I was curious, what clearance rate or percent would you want to achieve or feel is achievable?
Well, I've been doing this a little while, Madam Mayor, and I'm very happy with that number compared to the national average. I've seen times, and it's ebb and flow, where you're down on your staffing numbers and your cases are up, that number drops significantly. Because when you start stacking cases on your officers and they're carrying caseloads, 15, 20, 25 cases, it becomes very challenging for them to give the due diligence to every case the way it's supposed to. So right now, I'm pretty happy with that. I will take an increase anytime, but I think that's a respectable number.
Okay, that's good to know. Why do you think we had an increase of 6.62% in calls?
It's hard to say. Without going through the calls and analyzing them, it's very difficult to say. And I have not done that, quite honestly. Our numbers are pretty consistent in terms of our criminal activity. We may have seen an uptick in calls that weren't related to crime. We may have seen an uptick in accidents. But that number is not remarkably different. So quite honestly, I haven't invested a lot of time in trying to determine that.
Good to know. Sure, yeah, please, yes, it's a casual setting today.
I don't want to go too far afield, but can you say a little bit about how this case counting process fits into, well, I'll just give kind of a vague example. Like if there's a report of vandalism in a certain part of town and one particular officer responds to that, it's on his shift, he kind of does the beginning of the investigation. And then maybe a day or several days later, on a different shift, there's a call on a different officer. How does that all eventually get pulled together?
That's a great question. So, we try to look at reports daily so that we can identify patterns and trends. We have a couple different levels of approval. So we have the officer taking the report, the first line supervisor, which is the shift sergeant, reviewing the report. That information is passed on shift to shift daily. And we have an electronic call log or pass-along log that sergeants fill out, and it's contained within our records management system. And they put notes about criminal activity, wanted people, wanted vehicles, that type of thing, officer safety alerts. So all that information is passed on daily. The next level, we have the detective sergeant reviewing the cases, and he's like the first level of clearinghouse, if you will, to determine if this is a distinguishable pattern or trend, and whether or not that's being investigated at the detective, within the detective unit, or it's been assigned to a particular officer within the patrol squad. And then he will direct that there. And then we have a third level where Commander Bell comes in and communicates with Sergeant Leonard about, how to best address these issues. So that's the daily process going through the calls. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. So just, again, going back on page 11, just a couple significant accomplishments in 2022. We had this stabbing that we were able to clear in January, very early of 2022. And then in February of 2022, we had a threat of an impending school shooting where we first saw our patrol officers acting in a very diverse capacity. And what I mean is now Detective Rockmore, Cassie Rockmore, was able to utilize social media features and identify our suspect through that. And then it was a collaboration. And to your earlier question, Councilwoman Tracy, there were multiple shifts between the time this initial call came in and the time that we made the arrest. And that information was passed along effectively, streamlining that process and making sure that we provided that high level of service, culminating in an arrest of an individual, and he was charged appropriately. And of course, we were able to dispel the threat that, I say dispel the threat, that's what it initially was, but, we question whether or not that might have matriculated to something else when we found the weapons that the suspect had hid from us in a field. So we really question his motives of whether or not it was a threat or a plan, if you will. Some other accomplishments we had throughout 22, coordinating a homeless camp cleanup directive with the city, working with Parks and Rec, Mr. Stevens, our code enforcement. We've identified a path, and it's a path that begins with warnings and offerings of help, and then it matriculates eventually to enforcement if necessary, and a path for how to collect and maintain, according to law, their property before it's disposed of. Officer Wade, Gary Wade, who was before you the other night, was a driving force in that initiative, and he's on the bikes 3 or 4 times a week out there on the Riverwalk to kind of keep us in line there. We conducted a active shooter functional exercise with the school district. That was huge. We hadn't done one, I'm told, in a number of years. So we were able to identify some gaps and address some issues. We've reinforced our breaching capabilities. We all saw the tragedy in Uvalde, Texas, when you're underprepared and you're not ready to go through that door and address a threat. So we have certainly expanded our capabilities there with manual breaching training, manual breaching tools, and we made the purchase of a pneumatic breacher. I'm told it's coming soon. We're hoping that it gets here pretty quickly, but as soon as that gets here, everybody has been certified on the manual breaching tools. We worked in concert. Our fire department was very gracious. They're very skilled at making manual entry into structures, and they were instrumental in helping our folks adopt that capacity. So we identified that, and we're moving forward. And our next functional exercise, I think we're going to look at also moving into reintegration, what happens afterwards, which is always kind of an Achilles heel in those events where we want to identify security for our off-site staging areas for students, for staff, for media, for parents, and then the reintegration of parents and students. So that's going to be a huge undertaking. We've identified some gaps with access. We're correcting those now. Well, most of it has been corrected with key cards and then the knock boxes with the additional Grandmaster keys, gaining us the access that we need throughout the school. We also assigned a new SRO at the school, bringing our total up to 3. And that is a huge component, again, when we talk about trust and transparency, building those bridges very early with our young kids, our young citizens, I should say. Having those relationships established provides all kinds of dividends down the road in terms of, just confidence in their police department, having that network and having that connection, being able to communicate with somebody in the police department. It provides all kinds of benefits for our organization.
Chief Schick, before
Yes.
before you move on, can you talk a little bit more about, we have 3 SROs, but officers are also encouraged to stop by the schools
Yes.
on a rotating basis or on
yes,
an ad
thank
hoc
you.
basis. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes,
please?
yes. Thanks, Mr. Stevens. So we, in between those response to calls, we encourage our officers to go by and visit with schools and do walkthroughs, knuckle the kids, stop and talk with them. And it's also a path for them to become familiar with the school, because not everyone that we hire is from Canyon City. Not all of them went to Canyon City Public Schools. So it's an opportunity for them to get into the school and start getting an understanding of the footprint, and what that response might look like if God forbid we ever got called in that capacity. So, but we are encouraging that, and as our staffing numbers continue to increase, they get more opportunities to do that between calls.
Chief, how are the playing cards? Are they being used at all, or?
Well, they lost their luster a little bit, I think. I think a lot of kids already got them. So I don't know. It's funny you asked that. I was thinking about that yesterday, as a matter of fact. What new twist we could put on the cards to bring them back and make them as interesting as they were. But no, I mean, they were a huge hit when we brought them out. Everybody wanted them. And in fact, I went through my entire box like real quick. But yeah, the luster kind of died off a little bit. So we're gonna have to come up with a new end. So put some
maybe
sort
a
of
poker-
interesting
Poker game? or-
yeah, game, social media, I don't know, something.
Chief, I had a question. When you were talking about officers being encouraged to go by the schools,
Yes, ma'am.
what about the library and the museum? Is that something they could do?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know, I don't know, I'll have to look into the museum, but I do know that we had some focused efforts by a particular patrol shift at the library, because we were having some issues at the library. And that shift, that was Sergeant Mall's shift. You'll meet him next month, because they're getting recognized before council. But they took it upon themselves to go down there and frequently do foot patrols down in the plaza, and then go through the library. And they were able to identify some offenders that caused some concerns in the library. And their constant presence, or I shouldn't say constant, but frequent random presence sort of got rid of those problems in the library.
We even had officers that were writing their end-of-shift reports in the library,
Yeah.
just kind of finishing
Yeah.
up the day.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a great, I like that a lot. At the museum, she seems to have problems with that. People hang out in the alley behind those old
back.
houses.
Yeah.
And sometimes at the end of the day, just as they're about to close, there are people that hang out on the steps.
Well, I do know that we've had a number of times they've been on our patrol watch. So I speak with Lisa pretty regularly, you know, at least at our department head meetings, and she's got my cell. I encourage her to call me, but I would encourage them to call if they have people hanging out when they're getting ready to close. And again, while we try to, you know, be everywhere, it's often very helpful, whether it's a city employee, a city structure, or just a resident, to call and notify us, because that puts you in the queue and that guarantees a response. So if you call and say, hey, I've got some folks out back, they look a little suspicious, they're concerning, whatever, you go in the queue and you get an officer dispatched. If I take it back because you told me 3 days after or 2 weeks after, and we put it on patrol watch, then that's just a random visit by an officer throughout his day. So may be there, may not be there. But I will certainly make a note. I make sure that, I'm not sure they're on the patrol watch right now, so we might have to put them back on. But I'll reach out to Lisa and see if there's some focused effort that we need to engage in to, you know, dissuade some activity.
All right, Chief, we have 25 minutes left, and that includes hopefully some time to ask questions, more questions at the end. Just for a heads up.
Keep going?
Yes.
Okay, all right. 25 minutes, I'm going to try and just hit on some really tall points. So you may have noticed with our increase in staffing, we've committed a greater focus on traffic enforcement. Our summonses are up considerably. I think looking at our citizen contact by SmartForce, we just engaged the analytics, and I was amazed that you know, we had over 100 traffic stops, or I'm sorry, almost 200 traffic stops in March. That's 1 month. If you were to roll back, we were lucky to get 200 stops or 200 summonses in a quarter. So that activity's picked up quite a bit. Reflected here is Officer Gary's impressive log of 4,447 minutes of enforcement on the traffic log. We started an active traffic log, so every one of those areas that gets studied that we talked about with the speed measurement devices, we put them on a traffic enforcement log so that they know the area, they know the times, those peak traffic times, the peak volume, the peak speeders, so that they can focus their efforts there. And he logged a considerable number of hours. We conducted 10 active threat trainings for business. Of course, our bike patrol was established in 2022. Remarkable success down there on the Riverwalk. And I think folks are you know, very comfortable with seeing us out there. So we're just getting our, you probably remember I was talking last year about Q-Hit, our customer survey software. We actually went live, I think about 3 weeks ago. So we're looking forward to our first data report, getting an idea how we're doing, what those numbers look like. So you saw the focused efforts of our narcotics division and our collaborative efforts and what it culminated in last week. That was a remarkable undertaking and remarkable bust. Our bike officers again, and so we're really excited about getting Tyler, and I just talked about Citizen Contacts, the analytics we just activated in that. Citizen Contact is that mandate that we have by law to note every contact that we have and what the capacity is, the demographics involved with the stop, whether or not you committed searches and things of that nature. All that data that we're required to report to the state, Citizen Contact hosts that for us. And they just started a new analytics component on it, and we got that up, and we're starting to kind of digest that to see what we're doing. And I know I haven't talked about this in a while. After almost a year of negotiations, we finally, all of the chiefs and sheriffs have finally settled, and CBI and the district attorney on our, excuse me, our criminal investigative response team MOU. So I've got most of the chiefs and sheriffs' signatures. We're working with the coroners now to get them signed off. The DA's signed off, CBI's signed off. So I'm hoping probably within the next couple of months that's going to go live, and that's huge for us, because that's a resource multiplier for all of our agencies. A lot of support there when we have those large incidents that most of our agencies can't manage themselves alone. Support Services Division, you look there on page 13, the bottom says it all. 1,356 calls for service, ranging from stray dogs to mobile homes inspections. They inspected 519 our mobile home parks have never looked as good as they look right now. Just remarkable results there from all of their efforts. And the most significant point that I'm very proud of is how hard they work to resolve 85% of those violations with voluntary compliance. And that's due diligence in action. That's going out there, noting the violation, talking with the owner or the tenant, talking about what needs to be done, talking about how to get it done, and then, you know, following back up sometimes numerous times. But that's a very successful initiative
Chief?
that they've got.
Thank you
Yes.
so much for that, and absolutely couldn't agree more. Being very proud of the 85% resolution without violation through voluntary complaints. I'm wondering if you have a kind of an analogy or an analogous stat for the 1356 service calls to the case clearance rate. Do you know how many of those were closed, or do you keep those kinds of numbers as well? Thanks.
We absolutely do, and I absolutely do not have it for you, but I will get it. That's a great question.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Just making a note if anybody else has any questions.
You're probably getting to this, Chief, but for the evidence unit, I see that you guys did a remarkable 1,547 new pieces, and you processed
Yes,
digital
ma'am.
evidence, a lot of it. I know we had a really large backlog of evidence. I was wondering, how are we doing on that?
That's a great question. So we not only had a backlog of evidence, we had a lot of evidence within our primary vault that needed to be parsed out and determined, you know, what was needed to keep and what we could get rid of, what we could dispose of. So Emily primarily and BJ have worked diligently. Now remember, last year until January, she was only 4 hours a day. So typically that day looked like maintenance, bringing evidence in, taking evidence to CBI, picking evidence up from CBI, checking it back in. So in January, she went full-time. So we are in the process now of doing a full inventory, and Commander Van Dyke told me this morning that we are looking at around 600 items of evidence ready for disposal. So we put a new policy in place. We spoke with the district attorney. Linda Stanley was able to codify our policy and identify those events where we could do immediate disposal, those low-lying crimes and misdemeanors and things of that nature, which has really streamlined it, because a lot of that backlog was occurring because of the intra-office communication between our office and the DA's office. It would just sit on somebody's desk for a while before it got rolled back around. So that contributed heavily. So that policy is going to streamline a lot of things. So we're in a good place. We last year, towards the end of the year, we destroyed, I want to say, nearly 100 firearms, and a considerable amount of old drug evidence. And we are on track this year to do far more than that. They are identifying, they're going through it right now and identifying everything that can be disposed of and moving it aside, putting it in a different location so that we can have nothing but active evidence in our main vault. So that's phase one. Phase two, we get to go out to the connexes and tackle those issues, which we're going to focus on exclusively. Talked with Commander Van Dyke. We're going to try and free up some time from Sergeant Dickens, who's in charge of evidence, and see if we can get also a new hire that we're looking to bring on who won't be able to go to the academy until probably August. If we can get the three of them combined in those connexes, I think we can get it before she goes to the academy. I want to put it as far in that rearview mirror as we can.
Cool, thanks.
So yeah, and evidence, our digital evidence, probably going to be looking at you next year for some additional help. Kim is just working herself silly. 49, you see nearly 5,000 cases associated with digital evidence. And the actual number of digital evidence that she has to manage far exceeds that, because that number is representative of the cases that those things are assigned to. And imagine working a case in a digital evidence capacity where you have 2, 3, 4, sometimes 6, 8 officers on scene, and you've got to reconcile all that digital evidence for those discovery purposes that we hear about. So that's a huge number, and I think we're right at max capacity with Kim, as she'll let me know. Yeah, moving right along, we look at our records unit. Just remarkable, the effort that these folks put out every single day. 3,200 phone calls, 800 public assist in the lobby, over 800 records requests. Those records requests are very detailed. They have to be redacted according to law, and some of those cases are very large. So, you could have a case, average case will be 15 to 20 pages, but you get into some of these major investigations, and that case could be a couple hundred pages, and you've got to redact all of that. You got to redact all of the body camera footage. So it's a huge undertaking. I couldn't be prouder of them. So BJ, we talked about her success with the crime prevention and all of our community engagement events. Goals for 2023, improving our program wraparound services and marketing for mental health co-responders. That's been a challenge. They interviewed 2 or 3 more today, and I'm told that 2 look good. I'm going to remain hopeful and optimistic, but this has been a challenge for us, and we introduced some relocation expenses, and I think that's also helped drum up some interest. We have a young lady who was interviewed very well today from Illinois that is looking to relocate, so that might be helpful. But we are steadily pursuing that. This year, we're going to try and reestablish our annual Citizens Academy community outreach program, and we're continuing to expand our social media presence, leveraging multiple platforms. We're getting ready to introduce Crime Watch, and that'll expand, and that'll become our central hub. It'll be kind of our clearinghouse for social media and our website. Everything will integrate into Crime Watch, and eventually, as we develop a robust platform there, then we're going to look to Crime Watch TV, and I would like to take those TVs and put them in strategic locations throughout the city. So if you're sitting waiting for a haircut, Mr. Smith's not here, but you sit there and you see news about your police department, you see who's wanted, what kind of crime's been reported, and it helps that dialogue, build that dialogue, and let people know what we need help with, how they can help the PD. So we're excited about that. You go on to the Administrative Services Division, Commander Walsh, and I'm particularly proud of Able, but one thing I want to cue in on, I want to talk about the low, very low number compared average numbers over the last 5 years of our internal affairs investigations. We've been very successful employing our progressive discipline policy, which has reduced the number of internal affairs investigations. That's significant because before, people were being investigated in an internal affairs capacity for things that shouldn't have been in an internal affairs capacity. Puts a lot of stress on officers when they are told that they are under an IA. So we've reduced that number significantly. Our founded complaints this year, I don't think we had any founded IA complaints, and we've seen a substantial reduction in our use of force incidents with our pursuits of ABLE, active bystandership, law enforcement, and our new acronym WIN, what's important now, helping them to understand the significance, weighing the significance of the matter and determining the priority of life, the necessity of taking action. All of these components have reduced our use of force footprint, and I couldn't be happier for that. In fact, I told you you'll see Sergeant Mall at your next council meeting, and I think you're going to be absolutely stunned at that incident and what they were able to avoid. Very impressive. So very proud of that.
Well, the 2,600 hours of training is also, in general, really
Yes.
impressive, because I know before you came on board that you had mentioned that the lack of training was an issue. It seems like
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You're hitting it really well.
We are, you know, it was huge when we introduced the training sergeant. Now we have an individual focused exclusively on meeting our state mandated training, but as Commander Walsh illustrated in this report, we far exceed that. And we are developing capacity, we're developing subject matter experts, and you know, that serves the officer, that serves the agency, and that serves the community in terms of career development, in terms of capabilities, and on the citizen side, satisfaction. So.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Chief, going back to the use of force just for a moment, do you have the broader context of that? The report says that there were 49 incidents of some level of use of force, ranging from, you know, officer presence to actually deploying less than lethal. Do you have kind of an average for the past couple of years, or anything to give us context of where we're currently standing and how
I
ABLE has
could
really
get it.
impacted the department?
They're in our 5 and 1. So after every use of force or implication of use of force, so now we like to capture those instances where we have to point a firearm at somebody or we point a taser at somebody. If we're asserting our authority at that level, we want to know what the circumstances were. We want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we're following case law and things like that. I will tell you, again from the hip, but I'm going to make a note for Councilwoman Schmischer, who always asks me the tough questions.
Yeah, well, make sure you
I should
CC
have
all of
that
us.
number.
Yeah.
I should have that number. I'm going to get it for you. I don't
Thank you.
know. I would say the majority of those are soft hand contacts and probably display of weapon. Most of them.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Got about 7 minutes, Chief.
Okay. Yeah, the training numbers are just huge. So, and I'm really proud of our reduction in the use of force incidents. Our canines were set back with the introduction of the new legislation. So I have another Malinois dog that he's in Center, Colorado. We've identified a new master canine trainer. His name is Bingo. He's from North Carolina. And we're getting ready to introduce Officer Zach Fry in that capacity, and he's getting ready to head out to center probably in the next 3 or 4 weeks and begin training with him. We also have, that will be coming on board, a therapy dog. The idea with the therapy dog, again, is that building that, having that engagement across the board, but it also serves our officers in a mental wellness capacity, and we hope to get the dog certified to assist particularly our younger victims in court with testimony and things like that. So he is a full-grown poodle. His name is Joey, and there's a story behind that. I'll share it another time when we have more than 5 minutes. But we're excited about both of those additions. Yeah, very much so. Sorry we didn't get through the whole report. It's a lot of information.
Well, we still have some minutes for questions. I did see that one of your goals for 2023 is to begin the accreditation process,
Yes,
which
ma'am.
is really exciting. We're getting to that point.
Yeah, we're excited about that. Commander Walsh is, he's going to join me. So I've done a couple accreditations as an assessor. I did Greeley PD, and right now we're getting ready to do another one. The name of the department's escaping me. But Commander Walsh is going to accompany me in that, and that will give him a firsthand look at what the accreditation process looks like. And Ms. Alvarez is going to join him in that capacity. So I think by the end of the year, we're going to have an idea of what we need to do, and we can begin that pursuit. We will certainly be accredited by the end of 24, for sure. So we're hoping 23, but I venture to say it's probably going to be first quarter of 24. That's our goal.
Well, that was one of your original goals.
Yes, ma'am.
And I like it.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Took a little longer than I had hoped, but we have to get things in place. So,
Certainly.
Would you mind speaking just generally about some of the overall trends that are noted in your wonderful graphs in Appendix A?
what do we have in Appendix A?
It's all the crime stats.
Yes, well, I see a lot of crime reductions for 2022, which is really awesome, but there's also a couple of spots where there were some increases.
Yeah, a few in-person crimes, like we saw an uptick in our robberies. But overall, very low number, 12. That's a comfortable number to have when you're talking about robberies. So moving in, looking at burglaries, we had a total of 57 cases. What was remarkable about the burglary count, that's not traditionally what you would think about a burglary, where the elements of the crime of burglary require breaking and entering another place or dwelling and committing a crime therein. Several of these, turns out, when we ban people from Walmart for shoplifting, and we have multiple cases of shoplifting with individuals, then we start charging them with burglary because it meets the statute. It's not the typical definition of burglary in the sense that we would expect, but it just requires someone to go into a place that they've been forbid and commit a crime while they're there. So sometimes that's leveraged against repeat offenders in shoplifting events, and that drives that number up. And our fraud offenses, that number is down over the last 3 years. And there's very little we can do other than educate the public to try and avoid those and bring those numbers down. Our violent crime overall is down, and our weapons offenses are down. So, I mean, overall, we're doing pretty well, and I don't know that we can take a lot of the credit But I like to think we have some impact. So,
I have a question concerning the automobile thefts. That I came across a citizen who had a friend or a relative that had a car stolen, and they said, basically the police said they won't do anything about it. And so my first question was, well, was that CCPD or was it the sheriff's office or whatnot?
well,
But
I certainly
down-
hope
but
it's not CCPD.
But I just want to say, what happens? Because I do see that we do have
Well,
automobile
that's a
thefts
great question.
and not a ton of recovery.
And just for all of council, if you have folks out there that come to you in that capacity and suggest or imply that we underserved them, feel free to give them my cell number so that they can give me a call and I want to resolve that. I don't want to leave that hanging out there. But in terms of general auto theft, we're going to take a report, we're going to put a BOLO out, and if we have a suspected offender, we're going to put a BOLO out, be on the lookout for the offender, be on the lookout for the vehicle. The beauty in those LPRs that will be connected to flock cameras in each of our units, that's huge. Not too many police departments can say they have LPRs in every single car. We're measuring every car that goes by for any capacity related to crime. I think that's going to drive our number of stolen vehicles up. So, that's a great thing. But getting back to your question, Madam Mayor, once that information is disseminated, if we have a target location, say, it was a family member or friend that you suspect took it and they're going to Boulder or Pueblo, then we reach out and we contact those agencies and we put them on alert for that vehicle and for that person. If we have the probable cause to charge them with a crime, then we secure a warrant. Once the vehicle's recovered, we'll be communicating with whatever agency recovers the vehicle to try and ascertain if there's any physical evidence associated with the car, particularly in cases where we don't know who stole the vehicle. And then we work to get it returned to them.
Excellent. I have another curious question, and that was under sex offenses and the victim to offender relationship. I was curious because it has, of course, if it was a family member, or if it was intimate or an acquaintance or a stranger, but then there's a 25% that's unknown. I was curious, what rates it as unknown versus a stranger?
Here's the problem that I have with these NYBER reports, and Mr. Stevens and I have talked about it. Those cases, I suspect, because we do not have a lot of unknown person crimes in that capacity. Typically, it's somebody known to the victim. I suspect, and I can't lay any foundation to it, but I suspect that a lot of those numbers are generated in our prisons. And those people are not willing to report who offended them. So that's an offense that's reported as a stranger offense. So we've had people, and I've written letters to prospective citizens questioning our crime rates, particularly when you go out on the web and you look at like crimegrade.org or whatever it is. And you got to keep in mind, first off, these are companies that are also, they sponsor ads for alarm companies and things like that. But a lot of those numbers that they're referencing have nothing to do with our community. There's a lot of different variables. Walmart, in some capacity, increases our theft numbers. Obviously, it's the only Walmart, outside of Pueblo and Colorado Springs. So it draws a large number of people in there. Thefts occur. And then when you look at their crime mapping, they have a number of violent crimes, of person crimes, and they all center out there on the southeast side of town. And I suspect it's the prisons, because they report the crimes too. They have to. So I can't reconcile those numbers, but because they're physically in Canyon City, that, I think we benefit from those negative stats.
I guess I'm a little bit surprised to hear that, just because here for sex offenses non-consensual, there are only 16 cases. And
And that's not, yeah,
I
I
would
question
think
this
that there would
data
be more.
significantly. We have many more than that. And I don't know what's the discrepancy there. Yeah, we have more than 16, I can assure you.
So it isn't clear whether or not territorial is being counted in our numbers or not.
Yeah, not
Interesting.
clear.
But certainly the East Canyon complex wouldn't be. I would hope it wouldn't be, given that it isn't within city limits. So I mean,
I wouldn't think so.
I could see that there could be some concern that statistics coming out of territorial correctional facility might be. But
Well, where are they making their reports from? That's a question. Because their investigative office is on Main Street.
So you think that there's a,
I don't know, honestly.
okay.
I really don't.
I think that
That's-
that
that's a
certainly
sus-
bears
That's a
further,
suspicion. Yeah,
further.
Might
I
be a
think it
question for the
impacts
next warden's meeting.
yeah,
Right, right.
Absolutely.
yeah. It's a suspicion, I think.
Thank you so much for
Oh,
this.
absolutely.
I really, really appreciate it. It's so chock full of not only stats and information for last year, but looking through what some of your goals are for 2023 and kind of where you're hoping to continue growing the department, I think is truly phenomenal. And I really appreciate
We're-
the work that you and all of your folks do for us. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We're working very hard to move forward. Yeah, absolutely. Continue
think
to deliver
it's-
that high level of service.
I think it's fair to say we all agree that we're really pleased with the professionalism of the agency and your focus on community policing, 21st century policing, et cetera. It's really important that that's our focus here.
Well, thank you.
We've grown by leaps and strides since you've been here, Chief. We really appreciate you. Always get a lot of positive accolades and compliments on you as our chief, but also of course, our CPD and
Yes,
how
ma'am.
you're really leading them into excellence.
I
and we
couldn't
appreciate
be
it.
proud. I say it all the time. I just open the door. They go through and take care of everything else.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your report, and thank you for keeping Canyon City safe.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, well, next we have our interviews for our water committee that we are establishing. And I see we have a lot of our folks who have submitted letters of interest. I did get a message that Tim Payne, who is on this list, is not feeling well and will not be here tonight. But we do have his letter to take into consideration. So, for the benefit of the public and for everyone in the audience, we are going to have all of our candidates go into the other room. We're going to randomly draw your name and bring you in to just ask to let you make a statement to us, and we'll each ask you a question. I think for City Council, it'd be nice if we each asked a unique question, but it was the same question so that we can rate the folks all by the same categories. And then we'll have a discussion and make the appointments from there. Really, really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here tonight. Thank you. So is there all, 1, 2, 3, 4,
We're
5?
missing Doug Cohen, Tim Payne, and it looks like Diane Tomar.
Okay. Yeah, we'll take a 2-minute break. We are also desire the community to look at varying water options and opportunities, and we desire that the community work together with the city in finding solutions to current water issues within the city. We are also looking for representatives to be on this committee. It will be 2 city council members, a county commissioner, someone from the ditch or agricultural representative, a development representative, 3 from county residents with at least 1 who's a Canyon City resident, and 1 who is in water, recreation, or conservation.
Hey, may I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
The categories, do we I'm guessing, without pinning it down, that we might be still missing one or two categories. I just wanted to confirm that. Do we have, or do we know yet if we have someone from the Water Recreation or Conservation Group? And
I believe Mr. Brady has
Under that
indicated that
category.
he could go agriculture or recreation.
okay. And then do we, the Board of County Commissioner member or designee, is that still to come, or how would that be done?
I believe that Dwayne McFall has offered to be that person.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know. So, let's see. Okay, so development might be in question.
I think we
Oh,
have
we
some.
have one.
There is
No.
one candidate that's
Yes.
indicated development as
Right, Bill
well.
Okay,
Bradford.
yes, I did see that, thank you. That's all I had, thank you.
Okay. Denise, we shall start with Dean Brady, please.
At the cup there, huh?
Yeah. Hey, Dean, you're welcome to be up here or come sit down here if you'd rather have a comfortable chair. Doesn't matter,
Any-
just make
anyone-
sure you press the little push button to turn the green light on, so, on your microphone, right down here, yep. Now
Awesome.
we are in business.
I do get to watch a lot of these on TV. I do watch most of the council meetings on TV, which I really enjoy, so it's nice to actually get to be here and talk in front of you. It looks a lot bigger here, you know, than on TV, so I appreciate you having me.
Would you like to introduce yourself first before we start asking questions?
And I'm Dean Brady. I'm the owner-operator of Brady's Garden and Spas here in Canyon City. We've been in business for 29 years now, so we're celebrating a lot of years, you know, in an industry that is, of course, very crucial to our business is water, not only for, obviously, plants, having a garden center and greenhouse, but our wholesale nursery, and also what we sell, spas, hot tubs, ponds, everything there is water related. And it's not even just the water, the city water, of course, but also irrigation water that, you know, is very, very important to us, crucial to our business, but also with our customers. You know, this morning, my first thing that came this morning was my morning meeting with my employees, where an officer with police Sheck just being here, we'd had a break-in, and the officer came to give us an update of our particular break-in, which I was very appreciative. You know, they've actually been back with us, so I really appreciate what the police have done for us here with that incident and everything. But with water, of course, our garden center is heavily reliant on South Canyon ditch water, and so is our, of course, wholesale nursery on Riverside. And my personal property, which, you know, one day I actually want to become a gardener, you know, so if I retire, you know, I want to be able to have my property as like a truck farm and actually garden it and farm it, which my property is on Riverside, and so on the south side, I have 700 feet of South Canyon ditch property line, and then on the north side, of course, is the Arkansas River. So I'm actually kind of surrounded by water in that. And one day, you know, now I have hay fields on there that I, of course, use irrigation water for. But eventually, once I, years down the line, retire, I want to be able to use that water, you know, to actually farm, and which it has been a subsistence farm in the past. My house is, I guess you would call historical. It was built in 1893, which we have remodeled and all that, and kind of that is the grand plan of that house, is to keep it a farm, and that is heavily, of course, reliant on water.
Great. Dean, we have several categories that we're trying to make sure that we fill. That would be a representative from agriculture or the ditch, a development representative, a water recreation or conservation, or just a regular Fremont County citizen? Which categories do you feel you would fit best in?
Well, of course, agricultural, you know, with our business, agricultural with that. And of course, I am a Fremont County citizen. And all these properties that we own are actually in the city limits, but, you know, we would also, of course, fall under that. But agricultural, the ditches, the irrigation ditches probably would be in my wheelhouse more than anything there. Also, on the South Canyon Ditch, which we are reliant on all of our properties, our garden center on South 9th, my personal property on Riverside, and our nursery on Brewster are all reliant on the South Canyon Ditch, of which my oldest brother, Dennis, is the superintendent of that ditch, and my brother, Delwyn, is the president of that ditch. So I'm not on the board, nor do I plan to be, but I have a whole lot of information I can take from that. And with that, the South Canyon Ditch also provides the water for the Crooked and for the pump ditch, which we have a leak to, but I'm not on that board. But also this morning, after I talked to the police detective who came on our case, the first person was a person from the Crooked, the Lincoln Park Crooked Ditch, which had an issue with water. And they're like, well, we heard you're the place to come for that, because our ditch is highly reliant on the Brady, so they come to us for a lot of information. So not only with city water do I have kind of a pulse on what people are using water for, but also as a sounding board of what people are using, or what their, you know, the largest probably gallonages of water I would assume would be for gardening in not only lawns, but trees and shrubs, and for hay fields and fields of that nature, which are one of those things that I really enjoy about Canyon City is we still have these open fields that are really cool, very, to me, very beautiful to see, and without the water, those would cease to exist.
Thank you. We're going to start with questions. Amy, why don't we start with you, and we'll work our way down.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you so much, Mr. Brady, for being here. What are the top 3 things this committee should focus on?
One, with you in particular, I'd watched the council meeting where you brought up to form the committee, and one of the statements I believe you had made was that we're not in the interest of picking winners and losers, and that's very important. With that in mind, an example of a winner or loser would be, for me, Shadow Hills Golf Course. Unfortunately, as a loser on that they, you know, they lost their water, but, you know, it was also up to the members. But during that time, I had golfed at Shadow Hills 3 times a week, you know, with a lot of my customers and with friends. And, you know, on Mondays, I golfed at that time with with 3 retirees, which within 6 months after Shadow Hills had closed, all had moved away, because that was an important factor for them to come to town, but also a leading factor of them to leave. Of course, water quality is another issue that everybody should be concerned about. The river runs through us, literally, and living on the river where I'm always cleaning up trash, and always am worried about what goes into it. And having a garden center, I do have kind of a forefront of what people are putting on, you know, whether it be a fertilizer or even a surfactant that will help that water to penetrate to keep the runoff from going on. So it's important for me. And as a recreational, Monday I watched most of the council meetings, but I did miss Monday because I was fishing, you know, in front of my house in the river. So I didn't actually get to watch that particular council meeting. But so all of those, you know, drainages, quality, all of those kind of are big factors for us to maintain our water, which makes Canyon City really what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming out and applying for this position, because that's what we need is for community involvement, citizen involvement. Sometimes it's harder than you would think to get people to volunteer, to sit in seats like this and sit and discuss things in meetings. So I really appreciate it. My question is, what is your, and I'm also on the South Canyon Ditch Board. I represent the city, and I'm familiar with your brothers, yeah. So
Unrelated.
what is your specific, I'm kind of interested in this, this is kind of quirky. What is your specific experience with water conservation? Maybe at home or something you do, with your business, something like rain barrels or,
Well, that would be, the rain barrel, that's a great question because that goes down to specific water law, which changes water law. I'd love to say people know about water law, but unless you're an attorney, you really don't know. And it isn't, it's always changing. Within my career of the 29 years, I bet 4 or 5 times, just water storage laws with rain barrels has changed. So that changes all the time. So that's something that we're always keeping apprised of. For one, you don't want to sell water barrels if you can't collect water in them. So that's one big one. Of course, on my personal property, it's a 4-acre property, and I have about 2 acres of hay fields in that currently, and then I'm hoping to expand that later into more of a truck farm when I have the time to do that. So with the conservation aspect of that, what comes out of the ditch into my property goes directly into the river. So with that in mind, I'm very mindful of what I put onto my property, whether it be a chemical or a fertilizer, knowing that the direct drainage of that goes right into the river. Also, with conservation of the ditch, it takes a community and it's going to take all of us in Canyon City and in Fremont County to keep our water. And that means being conservative and as a community group, and that's my biggest thing, information, whether it be a customer that comes into my garden center or a neighbor, or I do have a platform, a radio show that I do weekly, and that is a very common question of water. How do you use it, what to use it, drip systems. The second person I helped was water related, and then this afternoon I hosted the Garden Gals Garden Club, which we talked a lot about raised gardens, and with that, how to water them with having respect to the responsibility of the water and using the water correctly with the drip system. So I have a lot of information and a lot of education and knowledge on that.
thank you.
Good evening, Dean.
How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing good, thank you. I've talked water with you in different ways of watering and saving water on our lawns. I've done that, and as always, and I have worked with your brothers because Lincoln Park Ditch, I've worked with both your brothers on some water issues. But as Canyon's growing, and we still have a limited number of water that the city can actually take. We're not there yet. We're not even close to that yet. But where do you see the biggest problem down the road, or is it a problem, or do we control growth, or we just say, okay, how many people are coming in?
Yeah, and that's the controlled growth. That's a phrase that you hear a lot. And what does controlled growth really mean?
Exactly.
And what it means is living within your means and actually doing the water that we are accepted, and we don't know, I'm not privy at this point to how many rights, for instance, the city holds, or even, with the ditches. But, with the growth, like my own personal property, for instance, it's 4 acres. It's a fairly big property, and without the water on that, what need would I have for that? I mean, right now I can farm it, I love the way it looks, but with losing that water, what would I have? I would just be basically mowing weeds or having to put rock on it. And that's one of the things, I love the green open fields, and I love the opportunity right now to be able to have my hay fields. One, it looks good, it's less dusty, it keeps your house cooler. There's a lot of advantages, of course, to having that water. And with city growth also, that's one of those things, you hear it in the news, Colorado Springs, for instance, it passed that law that they had to show at least a 10% surplus of water. And that goes deep into water law, which I'm no attorney,
Right.
but I do understand water. At our garden center, we use irrigation and we use city water, but because we're on River Call, for instance, and that means that you're limited on water, and that is, produced by the state water commissioner for our district, it would call my brothers and say, we're on water call, so then you have to be on restriction. Now, at the garden center, we actually have a system where it's just 2 valves I turn to go from irrigation water to city water. So I can able to do that without much headache, but with something to know that that's what you're supposed to do. And hopefully with that, with the committee too, is information and sharing that information with everybody out there that, you know, it takes a village. It's going to take us all to do this. And this means, you know, the simple water call is using it on odd and even days. It's a pretty simple thing, and not everybody, nor should anybody, have to be watering daily.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for being here. One of the, so the city council is asking the committee to look at legislative water issues, including, but not limited to, development regulations, water quality, water quantity, and conservation. If the committee decided that water regulation of substances was important, what do you think you need to know to be able to write a regulation concerning a substance in water?
So you're pertaining to a particular substance. For instance, let's take glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup, the common product that most everybody knows. For me, what I know in being in the industry of water, of gardening and such, is glyphosate, once applied to soil, it only is active on foliage. Once it's in the ground and dry, it becomes inert. If it's used in excess, of course, that's when it shows up in water. And I take that back to the product diazinon. Diazinon was a very popular insecticide that was used not only in gardens for grubs, but on plants for aphids or any type of topical. But because it was so widely used, it started coming up in water tests, and therefore it was banned. And it's been off the market for years. But it was a very effective product, but it was overused. And that would be one of those concerns for me, not only for the water quality, but then what I'm actually selling, but knowing kind of what I know, diazinon was not breaking down in the ground, and it was staying effective. And therefore, that is a substance issue, which then was dealt with. And then on my side of the garden, then I have to come up with alternatives, you know, for that, whether it be a permethrin or an organic like a neem oil or a pyrethrin, which I talk a lot on, say, my garden show there, so that again, the information is put out there that one is gone for a reason. What can we use instead? And when to use it and how to use it is very important. So substances in the water, again, I live on the ditch, I live on the river. What goes in it is very important.
Thank you.
A lot of good thoughts already, and I'm working my way now to the fourth question that I sorry, my button. So the question I have, and I echo the questions that have already been asked, but just the city's water department, it's an enterprise fund, it has water treatment facility, distribution, and so forth. Just wondered if you have any thoughts about those current operations, anything that you are aware of that you think is working well or maybe isn't working well, just if you have thoughts about that side of things.
Well, I did do a tour a couple years ago. They had an open house tour of the water treatment plant, which I went up with an employee of mine because it's right up above where our nursery is, and right up above where I live. It's in direct thought, and was able to actually see and take a tour, which is very enlightening and very informative, to go up there and actually see what they're doing, what they're actually adding in. One is a lot of sediment, filter trapping and stuff, and the different things and how often they change it. And also, watching the council meetings and with the new superintendent, the water superintendent, which I had them and the former one on my garden show, and actually as guests. And so they spread a lot of information. A lot of people called in. That was very good. And what I seen of the the treatment plan and what I hear, that they're always redoing it, and of course, staying apprised to the water laws, that's very good. And then on the other end of it, you know, it's important to know where your water's coming from, but also where your water goes. Whether it be in your house, in your shower, or down the drain, then it's going to the sanitation. And that is another one I've talked to. I had them on the show a few years ago also. And with that in mind, you know, that sanitation, again, there's a lot of filtration, but that is beneficial bacteria, which they use in order to break down the ammonias and the solids into then a nitrate, which then is hand in hand with what I have information on for ponds. Of course, ponds are the same thing. Fish are in there, and they need the natural bacteria in order to properly and naturally break down those solids into then safe, like nitrates and things that can go back into the water further down the stream. So with that in mind too, Salida, for instance, we have our location up there of our greenhouses, and the same thing, that's where our water comes from. Our garden center up there, Brady's West, is right on the Little Arkansas, the fork of that. So it's also one of those things that we're also concerned about. What goes up there comes down here. So it's kind of how we're related, not only in business with Salida, but with our neighbors.
Thanks.
Hi. My question, it's one of the things probably that I've thought about even before the 23 years ago when I moved here, is Canyon City lacks water storage. And do you think that is something that the committee should address or explore, or do you think there's just enough from all of the other great questions that there's only a limited amount of time or knowledge to take that on?
Now, are you talking water storage at the city aspect for, say, in a reservoir or a lake?
Yeah, basically, looking at it more from having long-term storage to be able to handle the peaks and valleys of runoff that the Arkansas especially is experiencing right now. And so looking at the ability to be able to have at least some type of backup to be able to maintain what is flowing now.
And that would be, well, for instance, what comes to mind is my brother in Salida that owns that, and we're partial owners. They were talking about on the east side of Salida, maybe putting in a reservoir on that east side to actually create some storage there. Now, I don't know if that would pertain to us. Of course, our water comes out of like Twin Lakes, and those are reservoirs, of course, that help control the flow. That would be a further downstream type of storage that is being talked about, or even here in a general look of where would you put said reservoir. Now, you could feed it with one of the tributary the ditches, for instance. You would have to find a big enough area with that kind of, that would be quite the large investment to put in a dam, you know, where there'd be. But when you look at reservoirs, you know, you have Twin Lakes on the west, and then you go east, you're going to go all the way to Pueblo Reservoir at that point. Whereas the Arkansas, in my time here, which is, well, all of my life, I've lived there, you know, basically in the hood on the west side there. And, you know, the river 2003 comes to mind, was the mega drought year. And the river still flowed. So granted, very small, but where, yeah, it would be a water storage issue, of course, a legal issue that would be beyond my knowledge, but then that would be a council and an attorney, a water attorney, to go through the laws of what water storage would be. But yeah, it's large, and if we had water storage, that would be maybe an extra kind of tool in your tool belt that might be able to be utilized for those lean years, which we know the years are becoming warmer, and we know that also the amount of moisture, which I've attended seminars for that, is decreasing, unfortunately, in the last few years. So as long as the mountains are getting snow, as we know, that's where our runoff is coming. But to capture that would be advantageous, but a huge project.
Ryan, did you want to ask any question? Are there any questions you feel would be appropriate to ask, Travis? Leave it to us. Council, is there any other burning question that you feel we need to ask all of our applicants? Okay. Then Dean, you're welcome to stay in the audience now that you've already heard all the questions. And Denise, if you could please get Blake Osborne next.
Thank you.
What was his name, Ashley?
Blake Osborne. Well, I think we'll have a discussion first. Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, Blake, you're welcome to
Hi.
come sit down here at the table because, you know, it might be a little while.
Okay.
Thank you for being here tonight. We sure appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
This is an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to us.
Okay. Hello, my name is Blake Osborne, Canyon City native, class of 2006, which is crazy that it's been that long. We're almost at 20 years. But I live in Canyon, well, actually, I just moved out of Canyon City. I live up in the Garden Park area up on Cooper Mountain, so I'd be applying for, I believe, the Fremont County resident position here. I am a hydrologist. I worked for the past 8 years for the Colorado Water Institute, a research group based out of Colorado State University, but I was actually the southern research lead, so I actually lived in Canyon and did most of my research in this basin and the Rio Grande Basin, but really statewide for a few things. Anyways, I just changed jobs. I now work for the Lower Arkansas Valley Water Conservancy District, so I do the engineering there. And I have a consulting business as well. I have a couple projects locally. The one I'm doing currently is with some of the ditches, Mr. Brady's ditch. I've been working with his brothers, which has been fun to build out a database, which again, that's probably just getting down in the weeds. But I do some consulting work here locally. I care a lot about agricultural water and protecting water rights. But I also serve on the Arkansas Basin Roundtable as the environmental rep for our basin. So I kind of have that piece in my background. It's where I spent a lot of my education and some of my research was in like watershed hydrology and that kind of stuff. But I've worked mostly in terms of water rights holders with agriculture. So I'm a big proponent of agricultural water rights and yeah, worked with a lot of different water users. But just thrilled to be able to talk water. It's something that obviously I care a lot about and try to involve myself in as much as I can. Thank you for letting me be here.
Absolutely. You mentioned that you feel like you would fit the Fremont County resident category. Do you feel like you could fit we're looking for maybe some dual crossovers as well?
Yeah.
Like a development or anything else? along that-
You know, to be honest, I don't know that I would represent the development community super well just because I don't have any of that experience and I wouldn't feel comfortable, you know, speaking for them. I'm not obviously against that. I work with a lot of cities actually, Aurora, Colorado Springs in my job. So I work with a lot of developers and a lot of water projects that deal with development, but I don't know that I would represent that group very well. Just
Okay,
because
yeah, no worries.
yeah.
All good.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and start with questions with Commissioner Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before I get to my technical question, based on what you mentioned and based on your letter, perhaps water conservation and recreation would be another category that you might fit into?
Yeah, conservation for sure. I mean, I've served previously, I'm not currently, but I've served on a few conservation organizations, board of directors, so land trusts, things like that. And then as it's worded, conservation means a couple things in water. Like you have the water savings, like low flush toilets, that's conservation. But then you have like the environmental conservation of like land use and that kind of thing. So definitely on that side of it, yeah, I'd feel comfortable there.
Thank you. What do you think are the top 3 things that this committee should focus on?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think one of the biggest things any community needs to focus on is...
Sorry, this committee, the
This-
water committee.
Yeah, this committee, yeah. Basically wrapping your arms around what are the assets and what is the value that we currently have within our community. Obviously, this would be a Canyon City thing, but Canyon City committee. So that's a place to start. But when you talk about water, you can't ignore headwaters or downstream users or other water users because they're so tied together. But clearly focusing on the Canyon City piece is important. So I think just asset sort of inventory, what is it that we actually have to talk about? What's our limits? So I think that's step one, get your arms around what are the assets in the community. Step two, how do we support thoughtful water use in our community? And I think that goes for water rights holders in the agricultural community, but then obviously the city and our situation with providing drinking water, both super important, and the recreation community that it supports. So, you know, how do we integrate that into the committee structure and provide value to those different entities? And then third, I guess I would say the water landscape is changing so quickly that not just with policy, but with just conditions, decisions are made on the fly all the time. And so just having a pulse on what's going on, I think this committee can kind of keep tabs on that and keep council members and others at the city apprised of kind of what's going on the ground as things change so quickly.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for coming and applying tonight. We really appreciate your time. And I have a question that I've been asking a number of people because I serve on several ditch boards representing the city. And personally, I've been interested in, if you look at what we have in this community, the water, if you look at it as a pie, I know that's kind of a crude way of looking at it. And I've talked to a lot of people that are in different fields around conservation, and they really didn't have a good handle on that, to look at it that way. If you're looking, say, residential and ag, and I'd say you're probably in a really good position to know the extent in this county, in this area, of what those proportions might be. Residential, ag, and then development and growth down the road. And so, because there's a lot of water-intensive things that may be coming down the road in terms of growth. We have several possible developments in our future. So, as a committee, how would you kind of address that pie?
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, that's a fantastic question. And I think that one thing I've noticed from working in other communities, I've mostly worked regionally, but Canyon City has some incredible old water rights that serve our agricultural community. And I feel like the water piece is pretty well set for a thriving agricultural community. Land is a different story because so much of our agricultural ditches that flow through town have sprung up, like Lincoln Park, which is where I used to live. The orchards are now, houses and stuff. So where the water can be delivered is another story, but the water rights piece is really good, way better than a lot of other communities. And then we have the unique situation with the hydraulic ditch that also, serves the city and its drinking water. So I think the city is set up pretty well there. So that piece of the pie, I guess, is pretty secure. As far as future development or the potential to grow in certain sectors, I think that's a really important piece to look at, and I don't know that I have an answer to that, but the more that we can value the water that is here so that we don't have to go out and look for it, the cheaper that's going to be in the long run, the more secure and sustainable that's going to be for our community. But the one thing that we do lack is the ability to really store or capture that water. So that's something I think needs exploring is how do you not only secure the water you have here, but maybe be able to save a little bit for times or sectors or industries that might maybe need that water. And so, part of it's dictated by geography, but there's other ways that you can go about looking at storage and ways of doing things like that. So I'm not sure if that answers your question completely, but I think Canyon's in a very good place with its pieces of the pie. It's just, how do we maybe formalize some of this and really store and figure out where to put it?
Thank you.
Hi, Blake.
Hey, Jim.
That was actually part of my question is, what do you see as down the road, what is our biggest struggles? And, we're looking at more growth, and, we're looking at new businesses, and, look at 4 Mile. We're gonna have a higher pull for residents, businesses in the city, but I think you just answered,
Yeah.
but if you have anything else to add along that line.
Not necessarily, and I think maybe I would just expand the question a little bit to think outside of just our community and the demands that are going to be placed from internal sources, or I don't want to say stressors on our water, but just it would be another source that would have to be supplied. And regionally, that's where the regional picture and even the statewide picture comes in is there's going to be pressure from other areas as well as other communities grow. And I don't think that can be understated. And that's one of my big concerns just in life with all the communities I work with. But just the reality that we're in of water and the needs for water around the state. So I think the storage piece is obviously going to help us locally. I think our water rights protect us very well, or protect the entities that have them here in Canyon very well. And so I think it's just finding places to put the water to allow that growth, but then being cognizant of the regional ties and statewide ties that could also put pressure on us. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, and thank you for being here.
Yeah.
What the council has asked the Water Committee to do is look at the review, evaluate, and make recommendations concerning all legislative water issues, including development, regulations, water quality, water quantity, and conservation. If you were to, if the Water Committee were to recommend a regulation concerning a substance in water, what would you need to know about that substance to write a good regulation?
Yeah, the first thing is how does it tie in with the state's standards? So I think the state is sort of the main governing body for specifically water quality, if that's where you were leading. Like for water quality standards, the state health department sets those standards. So that's the first place to look. How does that tie in with anything that the state might say or say not to do? And then I think it also, you look regionally and you say, what are the needs of our community and how does that fit in with the identity or the needs that we have in Canyon City and in Fremont County?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for applying for a position on the Water Committee. Appreciate that. I'll just make a real quick comment, follow up on something you said, and then I have a question. I remember when I served on City Council decades ago, people bragging about the city's water rights, and I always used to say, but be sure the water keeps flowing in the river and doesn't get diverted upstream over time because of growth elsewhere. My question is about the city's water department itself, that it's an enterprise fund, that we do, of course, water treatment and water distribution. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts about that and anything that you know of that works well or doesn't work well or that you might want to see done differently regarding that.
Yeah, and just to clarify, regarding the enterprise fund specifically or the enterprise structure?
The department itself and how the department operates.
I've been following a little bit about, what the city's done. I knew Bob from a couple of reasons, but he was on the roundtable at the same time that I was. So talking with Bob first and now Travis, I think there's been a lot of movement there, and I really think they've done a good job, especially with their rate structure. We were different than other communities in the past with how we were billing and stuff, and I think that's important to keep up with just the infrastructure demands of growth or of some of the stormwater compliance issues. I know that's on the stormwater side, but on the line replacements and everything. So I've watched the progress, and I think that, it's clearly headed in the right direction. As far as opportunities, it's the one that's just glaring at me is all the infrastructure money that's coming down and just being teed up and ready to kind of take advantage of that. So I think it's not necessarily something that anybody has a blueprint for, because we've never seen this kind of thing, but there's resources out there to sort of help make that a little easier. So I think if there's one thing kind of in the near future, it would be just trying to capture some of that infrastructure money.
Great. Appreciate your comments on that. Thanks.
Good evening. Thanks for coming. My question goes back, and you've almost answered it already, is my concern about storage. As you've indicated, we do have very old water rights, and alluding to what Emily has mentioned is that, yeah, it's great to have them, but do you foresee the possibility of having storage and how you would approach a large issue as that?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'd want to know the committee structure and clearly what our sort of mandate and what our lane is before I would recommend going and doing anything specific. But, you know, in my role that I have now, we work a lot with different federal agencies like the Bureau of Rec that manage a lot of these storage, and then like Upper Ark Water Conservancy District that has storage on Grape Creek, and they're potentially enlarging that. They're going through a feasibility study, and that's upstream of our water intake, so that makes a lot of sense. There's other ideas out there about alluvial storage, so I guess, you know, without knowing the purview of the committee exactly, I think just the structure and sort of the administrative pieces that would need to fall in place to secure storage, that's one thing that I can help with. It can be a tough and long process, but, you know, at least there are ways to approach it. Yeah.
Ryan?
Blake, you mentioned at the beginning that you do some consulting work. Can you talk about any consulting work that you've done for the city?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm trying to remember the timeline exactly, but I believe it was late 2021. I met with Travis and I put together a source water protection action plan. And that's sort of a derivative of a source water protection plan, which are really common throughout, and actually Bob Hartzman had one done, I think it was close to 10 years prior to that. And so just kind of drawing from that document, I did sort of the hydrology piece and looking at just, you know, the watersheds and some of the hydrologic components of the basin upstream of the water intake. And then I believe that was paired with like some ordinance language to kind of look at more of a big picture watershed source water protection type of document. So I did that. And then not with the city, but within the city limits, I have the contract right now to do the ditch work, building a database. But that's a different contract, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that would be it.
Thank you. I think we're done with questions. You're welcome to join the audience. And Denise, we're having Beth Ketchmar next.
And thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much.
I didn't hear anybody screaming so far. Do I come up here?
Yeah, come sit down and get comfortable. Beth, I don't feel like you need an introduction, but this is a good time to introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Beth Ketchmar. My address is 509 Main Street, Canyon City. I'm the owner of Pizza Madness, and that's, what else would you like? That's probably, is that good?
Sure.
Okay.
I would like to know if there's a certain category on the committee that you feel you would best fit, whether it was the recreation and conservation, or just as a Fremont County resident.
Well, I feel I'm a voice for conservation, but I also feel that I probably will be most representing the recreation because there are several people who are very involved in the recreation, Chris Moffett with RG Rio, Luke Javernick, some of these other people, but they have all said that they didn't feel that they would be able to take on another committee. You know, everybody has small children and lots of other obligations. So I said that I would be the voice because I speak with all of those people on a regular basis. And in fact, I think I expressed in my letter of intent that that's one of I feel is my real strength is I have the ability to speak with many different people every day through Pizza Madness and just going around the community. And people come and ask me about things all the time. And so I feel that I could bring a questions back to the committee that people have, and also other knowledge and opinions from other people that I could express for them. on this water committee.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll start with Councilmember Schmischer for questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks so much for being here, Ms.
Sure.
Ketchmar. What are the top 3 things this committee should focus on?
I think the top 3 things that they should focus on is water conservation, and conserving our water, both local use through implications of water usage and building for water use for conservation, but also conservation in maintaining our water rights and maintaining the use of the water that we have, and not having it taken through different legislative actions or different laws and ordinances that would cause us to lose the water rights that we do have. And then I also think that we should focus on limiting growth and being careful about growth, and emphasizing the recreational use of our water, because that is such an important element of our community.
Thank you so much.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Beth. I want to thank you so much, not just for being here, but for all you do out in the community.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. I was wondering if you could give us an example of your own personal, specific experience with water conservation, either as a business owner or as a homeowner.
Well, actually, my water conservation starts with the fact that when my family first moved to the Denver area from Southern California, which is always under a drought or not, and water conservation in California, we moved to Denver, Colorado, where we immediately were forced to practice water conservation. They had restricted waters in those days. In 1971, you can only water every 3rd day, and then further. My husband and I, so Colby, we lived in Montana for a while, but then we bought property in Douglas County, and all of our properties in Douglas County are on wells and septic. And I am very, very familiar with how the water usage has caused the aquifers in the Denver area to dwindle. The particular properties that we own are on the top of 5 aquifers, and when the original homesteaders that drilled the property that we own, when they drilled their original well in 1916, it was drilled to 25 feet and came out as an artesian well at 6,200-foot elevation. And when we bought the property in 1984, they had already drilled to 125 feet. We had to drill to 250 feet. And a few years later, after I subdivided the property, we drilled a second well on that property. We were given the rights to drill 1,000 feet deep, and we hit water at about 600 feet. And that neighborhood now is looking at drilling potentially up to a mile deep to try to get water. And so, everything out there is xeriscaped. I mean, it's all native vegetation. You don't water out there. And when you live on a well, and when you live in an arid area like that, you are very acutely aware of how important water conservation is, and all the damage that if you have unmitigated development and unmitigated use of water, we will run out of water. And I think water is our most precious resource and should be something that we protect above everything else. And that being in the area we are, where we still have such incredible water coming out right out of the mountains, it's beautiful water, and we need to be very, very aware of conserving it for ourselves and for future generations.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, Tim.
Basically, you just answered what I've been asking everybody else.
Okay.
And it's great. And, even looking back, you're saying Douglas County and that area. I was in that area at the time. I know what you're talking about. We had our Circle Square Diamond days. I remember those well.
Oh, yeah.
But, and that's my question is still, we're looking at growth. Canyon's looking at growth. We're seeing it out on the east side of town, different projects and, with the sale of the Abbey grounds. And, it's, how much can we grow and maintain that safe level of water and water storage?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we realize it, because, like I said, when we moved to Denver, it pretty much ended there at Cherry Creek Reservoir. There wasn't a whole lot out to the east. It was a very small area, and now, it stretches as far as you can see. And that I don't think our area can support that growth And I think we need to be very careful that, sure, growth is good, but not just unrelenting growth. We need to make sure that we are conserving the most precious thing that we have, which is our community and our natural resources.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening.
Hi, John.
Glad you're here. Thank you for coming in. The resolution that the city passed says the Water Committee will review, evaluate, and make recommendations concerning all legislative water issues to include but not limited to development, regulations, water quality, water quantity, and conservation. If the committee decided that a regulation of a substance was appropriate, to write a regulation for a substance, what would you need to know?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, but what I envisioned is that for this committee's purpose would be to bring our voices and the voices of the community, and hopefully be able to bring in expert opinions to come and speak to us about specific legislative issues, different laws that are being passed, people who are very knowledgeable about water resources and water law, and what goes on in other places and what other places have done, so that we could then present educated opinion to Travis and you guys to help your decisions on regulations of substances.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Beth, for your interest in the committee. My question is more related to the city water department itself, and the fact that financially it operates as a independent enterprise fund, and we do water treatment, water distribution, rate setting, all of that. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts about those operations, what's working well from your point of view, what's not maybe, or things that you would like to see done differently.
Well, as a person who pays currently, I think, 40 water bills, I am very familiar with what water costs, and it's very interesting, the different water usage that occurs. And I think the current water department is doing a good job. I think that we need to look to the future, and we're probably going to have to increase our water rates, because I think water should be considered more valuable. But also, we're going to need to look at, the current issues about things like reusing our water on a more regular basis, where we're actually recycling the used water and putting it back through a system of where it goes through all the processes to make it usable again, which I know would entail probably a total retrofit for the water department, but I think it's something that we need to look at, because I think that's where all water usage is going to go in the future, is should they recite these recycling parts. And I think that, and it's interesting, because actually the biggest part of most of my water bills is the stormwater charges. I might have a meter where I'm not using anything, and I still have $145 a month for stormwater charges. So, and I think that's good. I think it should be spread throughout the county. I don't think the stormwater occurs in the whole county. I don't know why that people in Canyon City just have to be responsible for stormwater. But I do think that we need to continue to increase our spending in the water department, because it is so important.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Hi, Beth.
Hi.
My question has to do with storage. We have very old water rights, which is wonderful as long as there's water. Do you foresee the committee trying to address that very complicated issue, or at least investigating the possibility of that?
Yes, I think that would be something that would be very good. I mean, that was one of the things in Douglas County was when we first bought our property out there in 1984, there were no reservoirs in Douglas County. And now they've created several. And I think that as painful as water storage is always perceived, I think we still have the ability to store water in this area without doing a whole lot of detriment to the environmental, like damming up beautiful canyons and stuff like that. I think water storage is very important, and I think we maybe need to look at different ways we can store water, but also look at more conservation programs too.
Excellent. Thank you, Beth. That's all the questions that
all
we
right.
have. You can join the audience.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we will have William Bradford, please. Yeah, that would be good.
Good evening.
All right, go ahead and take a seat down here so you can be comfortable if you don't mind. Yeah, we want you to be right at home here.
Limelight there.
Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Bill Bradford.
Is there anything you'd like us to know about you?
Sure. Native of Colorado, graduate of CSU Fort Collins 2015. Currently own and operate my own business. Recently bought in Dawson Ranch, but very interested in getting involved in the community here.
Excellent. We have the different categories we're trying to fill. Is there a certain category that you feel you fit best?
My comfort zone would be in the residential.
Residential?
Yeah. Construction.
Construction. We're going to go ahead and start with questions, starting with Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Bradford. Thanks so much for applying for the committee. What are the top 3 things that you think the Water Committee should focus on?
I would say the pollution going into the streams, the conservation of the water going through the community, and what's going through the legislation and the impact on water in our state.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Welcome, Bill. Thank you so much for coming out and applying and being part of the process that we really strive to get our local citizens involved. We appreciate it. I would like to know, just give me an example of your own personal experience or involvement in water conservation, maybe in your home or in your business.
Well, we're very well xeriscaped at our house now, but just in personal practice, I think it's just part of growing up that we've always been aware of water usage, and simple things like timers for your lawn got a huge impact, because we all turn on the sprinkler and forget to shut it off. So that something that simple. Being a native of Colorado, I think it's probably Pueblo, no offense. I think we have the best water in the state, and their water treatment facilities there and how they treat the water is a lot different. I've lived in multiple places in Colorado, but I also see how people use water differently in the state, because I was in construction and I've lived in multiple cities and worked in multiple cities. It just seems that we could do a better job with turning off faucets more often, and maybe doing a better job with how we landscape things, our malls, our schools, and our homes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Bill. Well, I kind of got to argue on that Pueblo thing, because I think Canyon City has the best water, and I've lived kind of all around the state, so, you know, I think Canyon City does a really good job.
We've only
But-
been here about a month, so, you know, I'm warming up.
You're getting, the taste buds are changing. I get it. I get it. So I'm going to ask you, and this is really good because with you being in the construction, Canyon's going to grow. And we're going to have that problem. And what do you see the biggest issue with our growth and maintaining a safe level of water is? I mean, and I'm sure this has been a question with you if you're in construction and you've heard this before. Do we limit? Do we put a pause on it? What do you think on just, where are we going to go here with, maintaining a safe level?
Bill, before you answer, can you talk into the mic a little bit more, please? They're having a hard time hearing you on the.
Okay. I have that from construction, at my age, so.
What was that?
I say, when I was in high school, I built homes in Pueblo West, and it was nowhere near what it is today. So if this town goes in that direction, you're gonna have problems. Right. There will be those problems here. I don't know the answer to that. You've got to reach out to your community and ask, our community and ask, what are we gonna do? Because it is coming. They've already overwhelmed Monument and Castle Rock and Colorado Springs. Why aren't they going in the fountain? Because their water's horrible. It's horrible. You can't even drink it. We know why they're not going to Pueblo, but it's not because of the water. It's going to happen here. So what do we do to manage the water here? I don't know the answer. I think metering it differently, and maybe, I don't know the answer to that. That's a tough question. It's a very good question, a very tough question, but we all want our liberties, but there has to be some limits with that as well. I know in Pueblo there is a minimum usage on your bill, if you use it or not. Right. I'm not familiar with it here and how it works here, because we just got here, but I don't know that you can say once you've used so much, we're turning off the valve, especially on the house size. So what can you do? Very, very good question, but maybe requiring low-flow toilets, things of that nature, low-flow heads. There are some construction options that could be put in place for new construction. Certainly in the commercial world, construction, they need to do a better job with their landscaping, in my opinion. With low water planting or xeriscaping would help a lot. And as much as we all like to golf, that's a huge impact as well. Those golf courses and how much water they use and what type of grass they use is a big variable for them. So, great question. Sorry I don't have the right answer.
That's okay. Yeah, I agree.
All right, I'm trying to ask the question for Mayor Pro Tem. And I believe that is, if this committee felt that there needed to be a regulation of maybe substances for water. Wait, let me get to my notes that I wrote. If we felt like there needed to be regulation of substances that could end up into our water systems, what resources would you use to come up with those types of regulations?
Can I have an example of substances?
Like chemicals?
Fertilizer, pesticides?
Yeah.
Contaminants of that nature? So the question is, if they were to enter our system, how do we mitigate it? Or
yeah, if we
prevent
needed
it?
to write a regulation for it.
You can't stop Lowe's or Home Depot from selling it, and you can't stop the homeowner from using it. So again, what do you do on that one? I mean, do you have a code enforcement that would monitor these types of things? Do you have a reliable way to find the source of the contamination? how do you know where the source is to alleviate the problem? And if it's residential, I think the impact would be far less than a commercial site. And if it is commercial and it's a spill or contamination like that, then it's definitely EPA-related situation. I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question
No,
correctly.
that's fine. Yeah, there's no worries.
Okay, I'm not sure if I understand that question.
Well, I think really what is that with each category, there's different wheelhouses of depth of knowledge, and
Yeah.
your depth of knowledge will be more in the construction side of things.
So if we have a car accident and there's gas, I mean, we've got to use some sort of a sand or something, I'm guessing, I don't know, to clean that up, right? Just like they use at the pumps to minimize that flow into our storm sewers that eventually lands in our rivers. So that would be one example of pollution or chemical spill that gets in the system.
Thank you.
Thanks for your interest in the committee. Thanks for being here. I think you said you moved here fairly recently, but so this question, you can either answer it in regard to our city water department here, or maybe just familiarity you have, Pueblo, wherever. But in our water department is a separate enterprise fund in terms of how the revenue and expenditures are treated. And we do water treatment, of course, and the distribution system. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts about what you believe is working well with that, what maybe you would do differently, or, and again, if you would prefer to just comment on other water departments that you've had contact with in the past where you've lived, and just things that you see that work well or don't work well, or.
I'll be honest, I'm not really concerned about the financials. I'm not interested in that, and that's not why I'm here. I know it's a huge impact for you all. It's definitely a variable for me. Some things that I see, I think that do work well is maintenance. When we were in the other room, I was discussing how they sand the roads, and then when they don't clean that up, that lands in your storm sewers, and then that clogs them up, or it lands in your river system. So my experience in Colorado Springs was that they didn't ever clean that up. And then it was built up over the sidewalks and everywhere else. I mean, and then the dust and the rocks and chipping windshields, and it was horrible. So the maintenance, if it's not being done by the roads, and CDOT is part of your storm sewer protection plan, monitoring people, right? So when they sand their roads, if they don't clean it up, then it affects our storm drains. So maintenance, same thing with repairing lines and replacing lines, and not keeping your old brick water lines or wood lines until they break. Just spending the money and doing the maintenance is one of the greatest ways to get a more efficient system that would save money.
Thanks, that addresses it, thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Bill.
Good evening.
I am your representative for Dawson Ranch, so if you have questions, I'm also on the homeowners board, so now you have a face to go with your yelling and whining.
No, we pay our dues, so you will hear from me.
Good.
We learned the rules there quick on that one. How funny.
And I'm a third-generation Coloradoan, so I appreciate you here, and I think you will find that Alan Hamill from Pueblo will probably send you a thank you note. So anyway.
Great man.
He's a very great man, yes.
Yes, he is.
My question has to do with storage of water. And basically, you know, with your experience with building and so forth that way, and having been in Colorado your life, you know there are issues with storage and the potential Do you think that's a potential or something that Canyon City should address?
Storage in large capacity, such as a reservoir?
Probably. You know, it's one of those to where we have very old water rights here in Canyon City, but if you don't have water, what is there to do as far as maintaining the usage for the residents here?
It wouldn't hurt. It certainly wouldn't hurt to have a reservoir. You look at the revenue and recreational value of it, and then that resource when things get scarce. I'd definitely get my vote on that one. I think finding the location for it would be the greatest challenge here, and then getting the state to allow it. I'm not sure about that one, but I'd be in favor of it for sure. Definitely in favor of that one. You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, those are all of our questions for now. You're welcome to join the audience. If Denise is still around, or Ryan, we need our last and final
Thank you.
applicant this life. Yeah, no, thank you very, very much. So, for the record, John Hamrick needed to go home for medical reasons. Yep, we're ready for our last one. That's a long evening, huh, Angela? Sorry you had to be back there for so long.
I got to know all of them.
That is a nice thing. And I was thinking this, actually, I don't know the use in having people go in the other room because they could just log on to Facebook Live and watch the whole thing anyways.
That tele thing is,
I know, you can see how you're
it's
looking.
recording everything you know, you
And-
say.
And, yes, this is a public meeting in all the ways. But Angela, you're used to it. You used to be on the planning commission.
Yes.
Um,
Good evening.
Please do introduce yourself to this council.
Good evening. I am Angela Bellantoni. I have been in Canyon City since 1993. What would you like to know, Ashley? What is the,
We've just invited everyone to just do a brief introduction.
Oh.
Yeah.
moved to Canyon City in 1993, and I started up my little environmental firm. It's been in the business for 25 years now, and that is the experience that I bring to the table and the web and layers of government that we have on all levels, and how that the different projects, whether it's residential, business, natural resources, whatever it is, you know, the layers of government change and the expectations change and the protective nature and the preventative natures of the mitigation change. And that's what I do for a living, is to try to determine what is a good fit, because you have to find that balance between what the government wants and what is feasible for a business that can be sustainable in our nation, in our little town.
Absolutely. Angelina, we have our different categories that we're trying to fill, and I was wondering if there was a certain categories or categories that
I don't know
you
what the
felt-
categories are.
We have
What are my choices?
development,
As in residential development, commercial development, what kind of development?
all of the above.
Both.
Just land development.
Mhm.
Land development, okay.
We have recreation and conservation. Then agricultural or ditch, and then just a Fremont County resident or Canyon City resident.
I didn't hear the last two?
Agricultural or ditch company.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just have an open category for Fremont County / Canyon City residents.
So I suppose I fit under development, whatever kind it is.
Okay, excellent. We're going to start with questions with Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks so much for being here this evening now, Dr. Valentoni. What are the top 3 things that the Water Committee should focus on?
You know, I think I need to know what the objective of the Water Committee is. Is it to provide guidance in reviewing applications? I've never really, is it contributing to the understanding of the impacts of a potential application as it comes in? Is it providing information to the council? Is it providing to the planning commission or the planner? What is the goal? What is the objective?
Sure, go ahead.
Why do you want us?
Sure. I'm not sure if you've had an opportunity to read the ordinance or the resolution that created the Water Committee, but I'm happy to summarize it if you would like. So essentially, the Canyon City Water Committee was established because the City Council recognizes the importance of water, recognizes the desire of the community to look at varying water options and opportunities, and that we desire that the community work with the city in finding solutions to current water issues within the city. And the mandate of it is to review, evaluate, and make recommendations concerning all legislative water issues, to include but not be limited to development, regulations, water quality and quantity, and conservation for the city of Canyon City. So it's to conduct work as directed by City Council and not authorized to spend any funds without prior approval. And then the mayor has shared we'll have up to 9 members, including those various categories that the mayor has outlined. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, and your question was?
What are the top 3 things that this committee should focus on?
I think that we should be protective of water quality in consideration of beneficial use. What are the 3 top things the committee should do? I think we should be a fair panel in considering impacts to water and what development could possibly do to that. I think that we should provide insight to perhaps even applicants, not just council members or planning commission members, on what might be opportunities to modify a process, a development, a use that would better serve all of the residents of Canyon City, to make sure that there are no implications or negative impacts to others because of a development use or proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela, for applying tonight. I have a simple question. Could you just give us one of your personal experiences with water conservation, either through, say, your own home or maybe through your company, your environmental firm?
So in most of my projects, water is not an infinite resource. It has to be quantified specifically, and then a source found that matches that, because typically my clients are unique in their uses, and that water type has to be identified, searched for through Division of Water Resource Rights. And to get permission to use that water, you have to quantify specifically your use, your beneficial use, what's going to be lost to evaporation, what's going to be runoff. It's a specific application in order to get the permission to use that water for the use, because it's not just a residential development that is a long-term water use. These are typically more challenging water uses, and in addition, the wastewater from those land uses are usually perhaps a bit challenging and have to be treated or managed some way so that return to our hydrologic system is good and there are no impacts to it.
Thank you.
Good evening, Angela. You know, you've answered a lot because already, and what I, you know, mine was question was just as, you know, what do you see the biggest issue with the amount of water Canyon has? And with the growing, and how do we maintain that safe level of water that we already have?
Conserve. We take water for granted. I was sharing with other members that my family, the motherland for us is southeastern Nebraska, and we didn't have irrigation. And when my now ex-husband went to visit my family for the first time, he said, this is a big risk. But we really have to think that way. We can't be, development has to think about the end use. We talk about the cyclic use of resources. Instead of cradle to grave, it's cradle to cradle. We need to figure out how we use a resource, and instead of pulling it into a waste at the end, it becomes back into the system. What do we have to do to that? We have to do that with water. We can't just say, it came to the tap, we used it, and now it's back into the surface water. We have to figure out what the entire cycle is of that water. It can't be taken for advantage and taken advantage of or taken for granted. That was the word I was looking for, senior moment there. I'm entitled. We have to balance the water we have available because we don't have an infinite source of water.
Right. Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question on behalf of Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick, who had to leave. And as you may be well aware, he's very familiar with chemicals and substances, and he wondered if this committee felt like it needed to regulate a substance, how they would go about to do that.
If they had to regulate a substance?
Mm-hmm.
Like what kind of substance?
That was his open-ended question.
Part of the reason, and I had a long chat with Mr. Payne prior to this process, was that there are a lot of regulations already in place, both at the federal and state level, that have to do with not only water quality, but water quantity. And there are many agencies that do this. So when we talk about a generic substance, I don't know, Madam Mayor, unless I know what the substance is. So I'm not going to generalize. There are already regulations. I was just working on a hazardous waste application this afternoon, and the standards for discharge are already set. And what needs to be done to reach that is there's already recommendations for those sorts of things. And if you can't meet the standard, then you do have to go back and you have to treat it. So when you say regulate a we can regulate a discharge by determining the water quality they want to be discharged. Again, that's already regulated as well. Those standards are set. But give me a substance. I don't know what this.
I think you already answered very well. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for your interest in the committee, and thanks for being here. As you know, the city has a water department, a water enterprise fund that deals with rates setting for water, treatment of the water, treatment facility that we have, the distribution system. We also have a stormwater system. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts about the current operations of that department, things that you see that work well or perhaps don't work well in your view, or something you would like to see done differently.
On any of those? Stormwater and the water, well, I'm going to talk about stormwater. I would like to talk about the calculation of impermeable surfaces, because I have questioned that repeatedly over my years since that started, because I really do question that calculation. I have, my husband is a contractor and he builds, and it never fails that the amount of impermeable surface that we're billed for is more than twice the footprint of the concrete. And when they come out and they measure the eave, when there's permeable surface under the eave, I have a real problem with that. So that's stormwater. And I have questioned that repeatedly and have never had a response back to me when they say they're going to take a look at it. So Commissioner Tracy, there's number one. Regarding the actual potable water system, which Mr. Travis takes care of, I know of the water source. I have a cursory understanding of his treatment system. I don't have any understanding of his economics. Rule number one is know what you don't know and stick to the topic you do know. So I do not know the inner workings of the water department and what Mr. Travis has, decisions he has to make regarding economics and capital improvements, or his delivery system challenges and how much of his pipe is lead and how much isn't, all of those things. Those are things I don't know. Would I be available to help discuss options and opportunities and alternatives? Absolutely. But only Mr. Travis knows, Mr. Payne knows exactly what he knows his system best. And I guess at this point, I would listen to Mr. Payne and then try to assist him based on my understanding of water quality and regulations.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
Hi.
My issue is with storage. We have very old water rights, but having lived here in Colorado as long as you have, you know that that could be an upward battle, but do you foresee that as an issue that the committee might want to discuss as far as storage?
And storage seems to be the big moneymaker these days. Every time I turn around, somebody who has a hole lines it and sells storage. It almost becomes a necessity upgradient. And you wonder, though, how is that kind of storage going to impact our obligation to the state of Kansas, though, if we keep slowing down the surface water in the Arkansas, understanding that there's rules that keep the minimum quantity in the Arkansas River. I got that part. It almost feels like we will need to be protective of our community. But that being said, then back to Commissioner Stein's question about development, new development and existing uses, that has to be balanced as well. So just because we perhaps invest in the storage doesn't mean that suddenly development can do whatever, right? I think it's an option. It's something that has to be considered. And people are digging holes that can be lined. I mean, I'm not being flippant about that. Okay.
Okay, those were all the questions that we had for now. I think what we'll do is maybe ask for the committee to go back into the room. Is that okay while the council has a little discussion? Is that what we usually do? Or do we just leave them in there? Leave them? Yeah, okay, you're welcome to stay here. Sorry.
Yeah, we didn't notice any exec session or anything like that.
Well, I don't think we're going anywhere. I'm just saying, yeah. Yeah, so we are going to be picking 6 of the 8. I do believe Tim Payne might be on as a panelist, even though he is sick. If you have any questions you'd like to ask from him.
I don't see any attendees on there.
Oh, so he left? Okay. Well, he is sick. So we already know that we have Commissioner McFall representing the commissioners. Do we want to go over the council member representation first, or do we want to delve into our citizens? We need 2 council members to be appointed.
Oh, those guys.
I know Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick expressed an interest in being on the committee. Is there anyone else who expresses an interest?
I think Andrea has, and I have, but I don't, might defer just.
Because I'm a representative on 3 districts, so it might be helpful.
So you need your mic.
Because I serve on 3 different ditch boards for the city, I thought it would be helpful going both ways for communications, but that's, up to council.
I guess I just have a question. If there's 3 or more interested on council, I'm not sure what kind of process we want to do to.
Yeah, then I think the sunshine law might be more simple to keep it with the 2. Ryan, do you have any?
Yeah, it would have to stay at 2 because that's what the
Right.
resolution says. So it would probably be a vote of which council members you want to have on the water committee.
Well, Tim has to go check out. He has kids to pick up.
Can you get to bed?
Do we need to vote on the council
But I-
members tonight now,
but-
since we're missing?
But I can
Oh.
jump on Zoom, not an issue.
Maybe
And
we
I've
could
also written down
postpone
who I've already, so.
That, as far as voting, that's up to council. If you want to hold the council vote at a later time
For council members.
for council members, yeah.
Just for the council members? Does any other thoughts on postponing the council member selection, or do you feel?
I'm happy to go with whatever, with the majority,
We
in
could
terms
put-
of when we have the vote.
We could put the council member vote on the next city council agenda if that's.
Okay, that would be helpful.
I
I
think
think we
that
need
would
to
be
have some more
good
members here for that.
without John here.
So that will brings us to the board itself. I felt like maybe we should start with the recreation representative, because we only have one that felt like they qualified under recreation, unless you felt like there was another, Amy?
I believe Tim Payne would also qualify.
Tim
under
Payne?
conservation and recreation.
However, I believe he would also qualify under general resident as well.
If we want to approach it from the point of view of just being sure we have those slots filled that are specified in the resolution, it's not that we're necessarily ruling anyone out, it's just that we want to be sure, because it sounds like we have 2 or 3 people. Tim Payne, perhaps Mr. Brady, and also Mr. Osborne that might fit that category. So it sounds like one way or another, we have that category covered if we're,
Denise, do we have pieces of paper that we can use for voting? By writing names down? Can
We can get some.
we get some? Is there any discussion on the recreation category?
well, I guess what I'm struggling with is the total number. We can have up to 9 on the committee. That includes 2 council members.
And a commissioner.
Yes, thank you. And I think just in general, we have these categories covered if we wanted to, look at all or most of the applicants being included. So I don't know if because some people are going to be eligible, so to speak, in several categories. I don't know how to vote by category. And is there a better way to do that?
I'm open to recommendations.
What do others think?
We could do a vote where the council writes down their top 6 selections, and we go from there and see how that falls out.
So, Tim Payne is definitely interested.
He is interested.
And
He
he
was
was-
online for a little bit, but he is.
And he was sick, I guess.
And he specifically reached out and sent a message saying that he wanted to be here this evening, but was unable to due to being ill.
Is that what you would like to do, is write down your top 6?
I think that would work, because I think we're not going to miss a category doing it that way, but I'm open to what others think.
Ryan, you have this look on your face. What are you thinking?
What do you think?
We can try with the top 6 and make sure that we've got all the categories covered. I think we should be okay.
I already have
and-
Tim's.
Okay, and I just want to be clear, you can consider people who were not here,
Right.
but you just have additional information for those who are here.
Right, right.
I don't know that anybody falls into more than one of the specialty categories. So, I mean, I think if we did the the categorized ones first, and then had a general where anyone who wasn't appointed to one of the specific positions could potentially be open as well as anybody else. Because I believe Dr. Bellantoni and Mr. Bradford both said that they would fall into development, that Mr. Brady and Mr. Cohen both said agricultural or ditch, and then that Ms. Kachmar and Mr. Payne both expressed conservation or recreation.
Yeah, I guess the only one that I had that, and you can view how you want to on that, I had Mr. Brady as possibility for either the recreation category or the ditch ag category, but you know, other than that, I agree with you.
So we have vote all 6 at a time, we have go by category.
I guess my concern about voting for all 6 at a time is that there's a chance that one of the categories may not actually be filled, and then we would, I guess, need to backtrack.
Well, how would you feel if we did all 6, and if we need to backtrack, we backtrack?
Fine by me?
Oh, is this our piece of paper here?
It is.
I missed that. So just writing
No council
them.
members, no commissioner.
Okay.
Just the other, and there's only 6 people who are here tonight, right?
Yeah, but you can still consider those who were not here tonight.
Yes.
You can consider
There
all
we
of
don't,
them.
you still, it's like, you count everybody, that's it.
There's a total of 8 applicants.
And what is, we just saw
You had 5 tonight, yeah.
we have 5 tonight, but there's 3 others besides these 5.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah, the 3 that were not here were Tim Payne, Diane Tomar, and Doug Cohen.
And we're doing our top 6. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. As you're filling out your sheets, please put your name on it. We cannot do secret ballot. We do have to have a record of who you voted for.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to be doing a hybrid. With the vote of this top 6, we had 4 that had a clear vote in appropriation. We had with 5 votes, have Dean Brady for agricultural and ditch. With 5 votes for Tim Payne, we've put down for a resident. With 5 votes, we have Blake Osborne for conservation. With 4 votes, we have Beth Kachmar as a resident. The other remaining 4 did not have a more clear designation, and so we're going to go back and do a revote to fill in 2 spots. I think we'll start with a development vote. And the 2 people that qualify for development would either be Angela Bellatoni or William. Do you want to vote by writing that down on paper? Just that one topic, yep. And this is for development, either Angela or William. He has one of his, so. Okay, so that leaves us with William Bradford with 3 votes Angela Bellatoni with 2, so William Bradford will take the development category. Now we have the last vote you can write down, and that will be for our final resident. There are 3 people that you can choose from: Angela Bellatoni, Doug Cohen, or Diane Tomar.
Mayor Smith, can you read the names again, please?
Yes, so the 3 left in the final category for resident is Angela Bellatoni, Doug Cohen, or Diane Tomar. Should we re-vote again? Or do I tie? There's a tie.
You would be the tiebreaker.
This would be the first time I vote on anything in my mayorship. Mhm. There is a tie between Diane Tomar and Doug Cohen. And I am going to vote for Doug. So, our committee, we want to thank each and every one of you who are here tonight and gave your time and your willingness to serve Canyon City on this incredibly important topic of water. Thank you so much. I think you're going to be an amazing resource for us to make the best decisions that we can as a community, and would like to put up to, do we need to have a final vote? So a final vote.
Yes, if we could get a motion with the,
I'd be happy to make a motion.
Do you need the names?
No, I think I'm okay.
We'll check.
Madam Mayor, well, actually, yes. Let me, can I just have my paper back? I don't want to get it wrong. Oh. Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we establish the Canyon City Water Committee with the following members. Beth Ketchmar as a resident, Dean Brady as our agricultural or ditch representative, Tim Payne as a resident, Blake Osborne as our conservation or recreation resident, or conservation or recreation member, Doug Cohen as a resident, and Bill Bradford as a development representative, with the Commissioner McFall serving as our county commissioner and our 2 city council representatives to be determined at a later city council meeting.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? I'll call a vote.
Councilmember Smisher.
Aye.
Councilmember Worthington.
Aye.
Councilmember Dennehy. Councilmember Stein.
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick's not here.
All right, the motion passes. Again, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.